If we speak very fast, let us know, because we are Irish, so we tend to get really excited and animated. So if you can understand us, just let us know, and we can slow it down a little bit. Okay. So starting off with display, as I said, I've been working in the South African market for about 5 years. And in those 5 years, I've seen things change considerably. So with regards to display, when I first started, we didn't have that many sites on the GDN. We didn't have that many targeted options. And we didn't really have that many ad formats. So they're kind of like the 3 key components that you need to run and drive a kind of great GDN. So we spent the last 5 years in particular really honing in on our Google Display Network and getting a little bit better in terms of the websites that we have there, high premium content, in terms of the ad formats that we've made available in South Africa. Previously, we tend to roll things out in bigger markets first and test them there in terms of betas, and then we make them widely available in other markets. I suppose the key benefit for us is that South Africa is English speaking. So more and more recently, over the last couple of years, we've opened South Africa up to betas that we wouldn't have had access to before, which is excellent. And then in terms of the targeting options, I'll let Paul jump in a few minutes just to explain the changes that have happened on that side, okay? So if we think about the GDN, in general, how does the GDN fit in? So we have what's known as a media landscape, okay? So if we think about the media landscape, the average consumer tends to spend about 11.5 hours of their day consuming media. So that's a lot of time, okay? And the types of media that they would consume would be the likes of newspapers. So they open up the newspaper in the morning. It would be sitting in front of the TV, online gaming, and surfing the web, okay? And where the GDN comes into play is the surfing the web piece, okay? So Brett talked about search earlier and about the intent to look for something. So that's basically the Google search bar, okay? So a user goes on, types in a query, and they have an intent to search. What these numbers mean, okay? So of the 11.5 hours that a consumer spends consuming media, about 2 to 3 hours of that time is spent online. Just online, surfing around, going to websites, reading news online, downloading music, online kind of on the social networks, okay? So 2 to 3 hours is spent online consuming media. Of that 2 to 3 hours, 94% is spent just browsing, just around what we would say the GDN, so the types of websites we have on the GDN, and only 6% is actually spent on search. So going to the search bar and typing in a search query. Only 6% is spent on search. So that's why we think it's very, very important that you guys know a bit about the GDN and what the GDN can do, because it opens you up to a lot more websites and a lot more ways that you can target users, okay? So you'll see here the 6% searching on Google and the remaining 94% consuming content, news, entertainment, email, etc. So what we're saying is be where your customers are, okay? So that's firstly, in general sense, what the display network is. So when we look at the kind of 3 components that I mentioned earlier, so websites, ad formats, and targeting. Within the websites, we've seen that the GDN has grown substantially in South Africa. So when I started on this particular market 5 years ago, we didn't have that many sites in the GDN, and we didn't have that many high-quality sites. We found that users' experience was quite poor on the GDN. And so what we did was we kind of had a specific drive. And someone mentioned AdSense in the previous session. We work quite closely with our AdSense team. They're also based in Dublin. And they have specific efforts to go out and target publishers to bring them onto our GDN. So my first ask to you today is if there are any websites that you know of that are missing on the Google Display Network, we have thousands, but if there are some that you want your advertisers to show on, you're not seeing them on the GDN yet, come to myself, Paul, any of the other Googlers, and let us know about those sites. If you don't remember today, you go back to your office, the call centre that Elizabeth mentioned, or any of the support team, mention it to them, because really we want to try and grow the network and make sure that we have as many sites on there, and that we're really, listening to your feedback and bringing those sites on board. So how else has the GDN changed? So you would get about 86% reach on the GDN in South Africa. So that means in any given month, if you run a display campaign, you'll reach about 86% of the users. It can be higher. We have about 3.5 billion impressions per month served on the GDN. And some other stats is that many people think of the GDN and our ads being shown at the very bottom of the page, when in actual fact 69% of our ads are shown above the fold. So if any of you are familiar with web analytics and heat maps, you'll know that the user's eye is drawn to a particular place on the page. So what we aim to do is make sure that our ads are served above the fold and showing in those particular directions. Okay? So just to give you some insight into the types of websites we have on the GDN. So these are kind of South African-based websites. Junk Mail, News24, OLX. We also have some international websites, and you might say, why do we have those? A lot of the South Africans browse international content. So they go on to BBC, and they'll go on to the likes of the New York Times, and we're able to basically identify that user using IP addresses and show them South African relevant content. So that means your ads aren't showing all over the world. They're showing on these international sites just targeted to South African users. So that's the first component, as I said, was websites, and we've gotten so much better, and with your help, we want to try and get even better. The second component is ad formats. In the one-to-one sessions, if any of you have any queries about the new types of ad formats that are coming online, just grab a Googler and chat to us, and we'd be happy to sit down and go through some ideas for you. Back in the early days, very, very different types of ad formats that were available on the GDN. The first being basic text ads. So the text ads that you would use on search, just the headline, 2 description lines, and your URL. You could basically just copy and paste them and put them onto the GDN. So very basic, very simple, very straightforward. And then we started to introduce things like image ads. And what we find is that image ads are much more engaging with users. We find that the graphic design coupled with text really speaks volumes to users, and they tend to interact with image ads a lot more. So some of you might have access to graphic designers in your own companies or else within the advertiser company, and they might already have banner ads created, and it's just simple, take those banners and put them on the GDN. Now some of you might have trouble getting access to relevant designers. To make it easier, we have got a tool in the AdWords account itself called the Google Display Ad Builder. And it's basically just a template of ads that you can choose, throw in the client's logo, throw in some text, and then that image ad gets uploaded onto the GDN. Okay? We've now moved into different kinds of image ads, so flash ads, animation. So we're getting more and more creative with the types of ad formats that we allow onto the Google Display Network. In terms of kind of the third ad format, and you'll hear a little bit more about this in the YouTube session, is video ads. And in particular, in the last year, they've taken off considerably, even in South Africa. So you guys might think that you just showed video ads on YouTube. So when you go on YouTube, you see some video ads there. We're seeing really cool ones for Savannah Dry, for some of the FMB guys. Brilliant video ads on YouTube at the moment. But we also show video ads on the GDN, so that's something to keep in mind as well. The third component is targeting. Again, I'll go back to the early days, so 5 years ago, when we kind of started in South Africa and kind of pushed the GDN, there were only kind of 2 types of targeting available. The first is contextual targeting. Very, very basic, very similar to what you do on the search site. You basically put a very relevant keyword list together. Let's say it's photography, and you have all your photography-related keywords there, and you want to show them keywords, and what happens, you want to show your ads on relevant content on the GDN. The Google system comes along and does it for you. So it matches, the text on the website to your keyword list and then shows the ad. Very simple, very straightforward. The next kind of simple way of targeting the GDN was placement targeting. So you might have only decided to target 10 to 15 placements on the GDN. So you want to get very, very targeted with your approach. And you select those 15 placements and again, put them in your campaign and you show ads against those placements. So fairly straightforward. But now what we're going to do with Paul is that we're going to kind of get into more targeted options. We're going away from kind of context more towards the audience. And things that we look at are topic targeting. So looking at the types of topics that users are consuming. So I mentioned at the start the types of websites we have on the GDN. What we started to notice is that users are consuming more kind of topic-related content like music, soccer, and what we're trying to do is get more targeted in our approach. So instead of kind of blanketing the GDN, what you can do is basically follow a user around, okay? So, Paul?
Great. I'm going to give you guys the briefest of introductions. I'm Paul. I come from Dublin. And Google search really, really bores me. My manager there is kind of shaking her head, but it's true. I think it's great. It's fantastic for what it is. It's a transactional-based model. You type in a question, you get an answer back. What really, really, really excites me is display, because it incentivizes people. It convinces people who didn't think they wanted to buy a particular product that now they absolutely need it. And we've just gotten better and better and better over the last couple of years at doing this. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that, but one more question as well. Louise asked a question, so I think I should too. A lot of you have used the GDN. Who manages a brand? Now, that's not good enough for me because you all manage a brand, right? If you manage a business, you manage a brand, right? It has to be the case. You might not manage Coca-Cola or General Motors, but you manage a business, and to them, their brand is very important. So I only see display getting increasingly more important as time goes on for Google, and some of the products we've launched in the last kind of 18 months are extremely exciting, and they reflect this kind of interest in display, in creating demand, and actually bringing your brand to South African customers. If I could just work the clicker. I know, it's so sad. I started so well. That would be fantastic. So previously, Louise touched on it as well. We were targeting placements via the display network. We were targeting specific websites. And that was okay, that worked for a while. But now what we really want to target is people, because it's ultimately people who are buying your products. And to that end, I'm going to talk about two of the more exciting targeting criteria that excite me. The first is interest category marketing. Quick show of hands, has anybody used this, seen it before? Okay, perfect. So interest category marketing is a way of targeting people, not placements. Your ads still show on certain websites, but not based on the contents of these websites, but based on the actual browsing behaviors of the people visiting them. And the way that works is that if you start to consume content online or search, we'll use third-party cookies to build a profile of who you are, the products you like, what excites you. And we'll actually start to determine that I, 26, work in Google, have a large interest in internet technologies, search engine marketing, and online communities. And that's pretty accurate when you think about it. As advertisers, what that lets you do is actually target this very specific audience in a granular way. We have a whole raft of interest categories that you can target based on these historic browsing behaviors. What I really like about this as well is that it takes a lot of the guesswork out of display advertising. Yes, you can use your contextual keywords to serve an ad about cameras when I'm reading a camera review, but am I really the guy who's passionate about cameras, who wants to buy one? Maybe, maybe not. Audience or interest category marketing or audience targeting, on the other hand, knows that over the last 3 weeks I've done nothing but read reviews of Canons and Nikons and point-and-shoot cameras, and it knows that this is the kind of guy you want to start targeting. I suppose the upshot of that is that knowing that data, targeting the right people, click-through rates, all-important click-through rates, are much, much higher on audience and interest category targeting than they are on things like keywords and managed placements. If your CTRs are higher, your costs are also lower, so it's win-win. The last thing I'd say about it is, can you just rein it back in just a little bit? The last thing I'd say about it is that by targeting a user based on their interests and not on a placement, you can serve them ads as they consume content relevant to your business, but also when they're doing more mundane things like checking the news, checking the weather. What's great about that is where you have a vertical, for example, like insurance, where everybody wants to be on those insurance-related websites. It's very, very expensive. If you target a user, yeah, you can engage them on insurance websites, but also when they're on, Sowetan Live, when they're checking the weather, anything like that. So it's moving away from those kind of very competitive placements and following a user across some of the more cost-effective publisher sites that we have to offer. So that's kind of how it works. We have 1,600 subcategories, ranging from arts and humanities, online communities, technology, cars, and automotive. And there's an awful lot of subcategories within that. I don't know if anybody here manages an auto brand, but it's quite reassuring knowing that as an advertiser, you can engage users on the display network who have expressed a particular interest in Toyota or Chevrolet. I think that's quite cool. That excites me. The other side of things we have here is demographic targeting. It's a relatively recent development in South Africa, and it's accurate to a point. What it relies on is Google properties where you would specify your gender and age, so something like YouTube or Google+. Where it doesn't have that information, it again builds this profile based on what you've been doing online. So it knows that if you like music from the 60s and maybe television shows from the same era, that you are of a certain age or have just a fantastic taste in music. I'm not sure which. So that's very, very exciting. Here's how it works in practice. So this charming young man who didn't have a beard, who looked healthy and skinny before his first trip to Monte Cassino last year. This is me, if you can't tell, if I didn't do myself enough credit just there. This is how it works. So I want to buy a Toyota Hilux because I'm in South Africa and everyone seems to drive a Toyota Hilux. I don't know why. So I start browsing for cars and I start comparing different models because it's a big purchase. So I look at there's a Ford Ranger there, I think, a Nissan Navaro. And I start consuming pages related to these content. I can look at the OEM's website. I look at third-party sites or car reviews, things like that. And as time passes, Google starts attributing certain interests to me. Starts to say, hey, this guy is really interested in cars, or he's really interested in Nissan cars, or Toyota cars. And what that would allow you guys to do within your own AdWords account is to choose me, the guy who's interested in cars, to serve your ads to. That's basically how it works in a nutshell. Very, very powerful. Uses all the existing tools within your AdWords account. Can be done in a matter of seconds. And what's great as well is that these interest categories populate not only over a long period of time, but it takes a good mix of the kind of browsing behavior that you've exhibited over the last few weeks, but also even the pages you're on today. It updates readily and very quickly. If anyone's online, don't pay more attention to me. But if you're some time later, go to google.com/ads/preferences, and you will see what kind of a profile you might have, or what Google thinks, the kind of person Google thinks you are. It's good, it's pretty accurate. I'm going to talk a little bit about the next process because it's related as well. It's about targeting an audience. Just while I'm just taking a pause here, there's some people sitting, there are some seats in the middle, there's 2 seats up the front. If anyone's kind of tired of sitting in the aisles, come up, have a seat. I won't stare down at you scarily, I promise. Yeah, I won't ask you, I won't embarrass anybody. I won't give you presents either, I don't have any, but maybe next time you're in Dublin we can go for a Guinness or something. So remarketing explained, this is a performance metric, right? And we want to get you away from this notion that, display is all about branding, it's about impressions and eyeballs and who sees your ads and how many times, and were they on News 24 or were they on webmail. Display can also be used as a very powerful performance channel. So getting people to convert, buy things on your website, sign up. Again, remarketing is another means of targeting people and not placements. Who's used remarketing? Okay. Someone how's it working so far? Someone shut up. Good, bad? You like it? Pretty good? Great, I'm really glad to hear it because this is perfect for me. This really excites me. It bridges the gap between... It's okay.
Paul just gets so excited about this.
No, it's cool. You can stand outside or something. It bridges the gap between display and search. Search is a performance metric. People go to your website because they want to make a purchase. Display can also be that way. What remarketing lets you do is actually target users based on the kinds of activity they took on your website or didn't take on your website. That's at a very high level. I'm going to try and keep it nice and broad, but it can be as complicated or as simple as you need it to be. The way it works is you just tag the pages on your website with an instance of JavaScript. Again, available within your AdWords account. You can do it very easily. And what you can generally do is use it to close gaps in the purchase process. Here's a great example of it. So let's assume you have an e-commerce client or someone who's selling something online. Again, I'm quite passionate about photography. So I go to Amazon.com and I check out digital cameras. Now, as soon as I get there, you, as advertisers, have the ability to start tagging me and say, this guy visited this page, and then he visited the next page, and all the way down the purchase path. I've provided a sample one here. So I look at digital cameras and I look at digital SLR cameras. I get granular down to the point where I start researching a particular brand and even a particular model. You can also tag that final all-important page where I actually make the decision to buy the product. And that gets pretty important. We'll see why in just a moment. But you can track me at all point in the conversion process. So when I don't actually buy, you can start using these custom audience lists to actually hone in on me over the following days or weeks and actually try and get me back onto the site to complete the purchase. So the way it might work in practice is you've got your tags installed and you start tracking me as I move through various pages on your site. You could look at, in terms of creating this custom audience, maybe you could look at the guy who visited just the digital camera page but who didn't make it to the payment confirmation page. And you can tailor your ad copy based on the actions I've taken here. So you can provide me with a very generic ad to get me back onto the site and considering my purchase again. Maybe I've taken a few more granular steps and moved further down this process. Maybe I've decided I really want a DSLR, but again, didn't get to the payment confirmation page. You can bring me back with an ad specific to the digital SLR. Finally, if we look at this towards the bottom, we can combine guys who did visit a particular product page, who actually did buy the product, and use that as a way of cross-promoting goods and services. In this case, you're targeting the guy who visited a camera page, who actually made it through to the payment confirmation page, and you send him an ad for a zoom lens or a tripod or something like that. It's incredibly powerful when you think about it, and you can tailor your cookie lists quite extensively. I think the most natural applications I've seen are very kind of obvious performance-based clients that are selling something, providing a digital download. Maybe you're a travel aggregator or someone who's got a good deal on a flight. It's quite powerful to be able to engage me after I haven't made that process. And we've all done that, by the way. You're about to get your credit card details out and the phone rings or something happens, and you say, hey, I'll do this later, and then that goes out of your head. The next day you're browsing on the GDN and you say an ad saying, visit our site, come back, complete the process. And we'll talk about that in a minute because you can incentivize the final purchase very powerfully. So that's remarketing in a nutshell. I want to talk a little bit about some of the more detailed and cool things you can do around that. So we talked about how detailed you can be in setting up your remarketing. One of the things that's often overlooked is that people say, I want these guys who visited a certain page of my site to sit in this basket or this audience for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. And a lot of the time, that's much too long. Great example, car rental, okay? I go to a car rental site, I go to Budget or Hertz, and I don't rent a car. I decide not to do it. And then if you've got a remarketing list of 90 days long, you could still be serving me ads 3 months later, at which point I'll probably gone on my holiday and come back, and I'm no need for a car anymore. I've used this graph to illustrate this. This is based on one of my clients. What's interesting is when you look at the 7-day period, so the time is on the bottom axis here, you can see that the conversion rate after 7 days, and consequently the cost per conversion, start to change very, very dramatically. Within the first couple of days of me bouncing from a site and not making a purchase, it's very cheap to get me back there and buying again. You leave that to 6 or 7 days, it starts to get a little bit more expensive. Maybe I'm tired of the message. Maybe I really didn't want to buy it in the first place. If you start leaving that to 30 days plus, your conversion rates drop substantially, and your cost per acquisition may be unsustainable. So that's something you should really take care of. You can decide how long you want users to sit in this audience list, and you can also create multiple audience lists. So, for example, we know that users are more likely to convert within 48 hours of closing that initial session. You can have a 48-hour cookie window where you give them a 10% discount or upsell another particular perk or service, and they're far more likely to come back to your site with that. After 7 days, okay, maybe you kind of want to make a more generic offering, and after 30 days, you can either cut your losses or bid in a less aggressive fashion. So I would consider segmenting your audience list by time, changing your ad copy to reflect this, incentivizing where you can with any discounts or other options or promotions that are available, and changing your bid strategy to catch those guys who are kind of 48 hours away from making that initial conversion. So that's remarketing quality. What's also quite cool within remarketing is ad delivery and exposure. Again, these are kind of more custom settings that people tend to overlook when they create their campaigns, but are readily available in your accounts. So you can enable accelerated delivery, which means that Google is going to show your ad to these guys as quickly as it possibly can. By default, most people are opting to standard delivery. Google will preserve and eke out your budget throughout the day to make sure that you don't show your ads to all possible users before breakfast or before noon. Tries to kind of flesh it out a little bit. Accelerated delivery means show this ad to my defined audience as quickly as you can, as often as you can. Now you're going to say that, hey, look, you've tracked this guy. That's a bit creepy. Okay, you've already got his details. Now you're spamming your ads to him again and again and again. That's not a good user experience, and it's not. So by combining this particular feature with something called frequency capping, you can decide that this one user only sees your ad twice a day, 5 times a week. And by combining these two together, it's actually a very effective way of getting those guys back onto your website and back completing that purchase funnel. 48-hour cookie length. I want to target this guy as much as I can within 48 hours, but no more than 3 ads per day. Those are the kind of bespoke targeting options we're looking at here, and those are the ones that tend to drive performance. Finally, the last part, you can actually rotate your ads for conversion. So Google will know which ad is performing best from a conversion standpoint, and it'll actually start to show that one. Remarketing as well. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with a tool called Conversion Optimizer. So what's cool about Conversion Optimizer, if you enable that on a remarketing campaign, it's going to do a lot of this for you. So it's going to know that, hey, Conversion Optimizer is going to know that within 2 days, I'm more likely to get conversions from remarketing than within 2 weeks. And it makes a lot of these informed decisions for you, which is really, really cool. Any other clients? So again, let's go back to my example of the Toyota Hilux, right? I want to book a test drive. I've already booked the test drive for the Toyota Hilux, and I'm going to go down to the dealer in Bryanston or whatever next week. So then it makes sense to stop showing me ads for that particular model. And what's great about that is much like we use negative keywords to prevent our ads showing against particular search terms, we can use a negative audience to prevent our GDN ads showing to these people once they've taken a specific action on our site. Again, readily available from within your ad group or campaign. It can be applied at either level. And in this instance, you will say, don't show my ad to anyone who's filled out my test drive booking form. Don't show my ad to anyone who's downloaded my free software already. And that's very good for other businesses that rely kind of on unique users to sustain themselves. A good example here would be, say, ringtone downloads or something like that. It's a subscription service. Once I've kind of bought into it, I'll keep buying or I'll stop. And it doesn't make sense to continuously show me that ad. So by employing all these kind of granular techniques and strategies, you can actually build a value proposition that isn't a million miles away from search performance marketing. And that's what really excites me. I was waiting for you. Anything else here? So a couple of other things around this. Remarketing, in my experience, people tend to use this with display ads, and Louise mentioned that display ads tend to work very, very well, and they do. But by increasing text ads, first of all, it's easy. Anyone can do it, right? You don't need to have a creative element to your team. But you can also increase your reach by 30%. And that's because there are certain sites that might not take image ads, and they might take text ads instead. And remember, you're targeting a user who's browsing all around the web, who has no particular preference for one website over another. So that's a very, very compelling argument to make. Also, a lot of people will target South African users, and only South African users. I would hope you're all pretty much doing that unless you're driving an export business. What you can do is, by increasing this to all countries and languages, you can actually expand your reach. And you do this again because your audience here is not defined by these settings, but again, based on the actions that a user took on your website. So if I'm over here, and I've got my browser set to google.ie, and my language might be a bad example because it's English, but if I'm from France, I'm over here for 6 months, and again, I'm looking for a car rental or restaurants in Johannesburg, something like that, it makes sense to actually target me because I've already told you that I'm a potential customer. I'm already more qualified traffic based on the criteria that you guys have defined by tagging me on your website. So that's another cool way just to increase your reach and get more of that cheap traffic. There's one other slide I didn't put in here. It's called analytics remarketing. Anybody using Google Analytics? It's the best tool we have, guys. I have to say, it's so incredible to give something so powerful away for free. And I think it's better than AdWords, better than YouTube, hands down. If I was on a desert island with my business, analytics would be the one thing I'd want to implement. But what's cool about that is if you've got analytics up and running, and you're using some of the key metrics here like bounce rate, goals, completions, time on site, you can use these as targeting criteria as well. Back to my auto example, will be the last one of the day, I promise. I spend 5 minutes on the Toyota website checking out cars. 5 minutes is a pretty long time, all right? I've kind of browsed various different models. I'm really doing my homework. If you've got Google Analytics installed, you can say, hey, this guy spent 5 minutes on my website. He's a kind of high potential customer. Let's target him specifically. Or let's add a negative audience to those guys who bounced off my landing page within 10 seconds of getting there. And by using these very powerful tools, you can actually start to refine your audience list even further. Geography, another great one. So if you've a local offering and you get maybe you're opening a branch of your business in Cape Town or expanding from Johannesburg, and you already know that you get maybe 30% of your visits in analytics from Cape Town, you can create a custom audience to introduce your new product launch or your new store to those visiting in Cape Town. Lots of endless possibilities and lots of really good examples of how this has been done online. So I'd give that a whirl as well, analytics remarketing, just see what's on offer there.
So we hope that was useful. And again, if there's any questions, just grab a Googler during a one-to-one session.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, thank you.